Jason, I've got a little theory about it. Jimmy Butler trade happens. There's not one obvious way to feel about it. I know very astute observers of the NBA who were down on it. You were the opposite. You were very bullish about it. And I want to know why you thought that it would work. And it obviously has. They're 12-1 with Butler so far. It's just been a complete, if you want to talk about renaissance, there's been a renaissance of the Warriors now. Why do you think you got this one right?
So I think that there's a spectrum when it comes to NBA analysis these days, where it's kind of like on one side there's the art and on the other side there's a science to it.
Yeah.
And I'm generally on the basketball is more art than science side of things. And I think in general, we try to synthesize teams down to combinations of talent or like essentially the sum of parts, if you want to think of it in that way. And so what'll happen is we'll see a Warriors team and we'll be like, they're bad. These metrics tell us they're bad. These statistical realities tell us they're bad. Therefore, they are bad. Jimmy is bad based on his performance relative to previous years. So why would you trade Andrew Wiggins, who's been one of the dependable players for the Warriors this year in terms of like their primary point of attack guy, the only guy they can really count on to kind of like contribute offensively relatively consistently next to Steph? Like, why would you trade this player for that player? There's this poll that I saw from, I think it was from the Warriors World Twitter feed. I don't know if you saw it yesterday, but
I did see it.
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting how people said, like, would you rather have Andrew Wiggins or Jimmy Butler straight up right now? And most people were saying they want Andrew Wiggins. And so I think that's part of the science part of the analysis, where it's like, here are these factual realities that are screaming in our face. And if we acknowledge these things, then this deal would not actually solve anything. The reason why I think basketball is more art than science is because I think there's just a ton of intricacies in the way that talent fits with each other. And I saw this very simple problem with the Warriors this year. They had this profound depth of role player talent to the point where it wasn't just they had a lot of guys who could play. They had too many guys who could do these roles. They had like, I think I counted 15 different players on their on their roster before the Jimmy trade that were like, hey, this guy can play minutes for us. And then over the course of the season, it got even more profound because it's like, oh wait, Guy Santos can play. Oh wait, Quentin Post can play. Like, we're finding all these players, Pat Spencer can play a little bit. We're finding all these dudes who can play. And so it really just became about roster balance. So you have this apex star in Steph Curry, and then you have this plethora of role player talent, but you didn't have the secondary star, which every other team in the NBA has. And so what ends up happening is the thing that happens in every single industry, which is when you take people and you ask them to do more than they're capable of, they become inconsistent and they start to make mistakes. And so there was a lot of issues within the role player talent. And then it compounded into now it's like, well, you don't think these role players are good. And it's like, actually, they are good at these specific things. Take Brandon Podziemski and Moses Moody, for instance. Brandon Podziemski is a good point of attack defender, a great rebounder, and he's a very good connective offensive player playing with an advantage and bringing all of the talent together. Moses Moody is a very good point of attack defender and a very good spot up shooter. He can knock down just wide open catch and shoot threes out of the corner really well. If you start to ask them to expand out of that, and it's like, okay, on any given night, we have this committee of secondary stars. It's like this night it's Brandon. This night it's Kuminga. This night it's Wiggins. This night it's Buddy Hield. This night it's Dennis Schroeder, whatever it was. It became one of those things where all of those guys were failing because they were being asked to do too much. Bringing in Jimmy Butler accomplished two things. It brought in a player that could take all of those higher level star type of responsibilities and alleviate that responsibility from the role players, and it shortened the rotation. It got them down to like, now they have 11 guys they can trust instead of 15. And so all of a sudden these roles started to crystallize. Now it's like, we don't need to start anybody next to Steph but Brandon Podziemski. He's the guy who should start. Yeah. Moses Moody is now in the Andrew Wiggins role. That's like what he's doing. He's guarding the other team's best forward, and he's picking them up full court. He's applying ball pressure, and he's spotting up in the corner. It crystallized everyone's roles, and it balanced out the specific weakness was they had a bunch of limited role players doing a star's job. And now Jimmy Butler has stepped in and done that star's job. And so really it was just about roster balance. And then I think the last bit I'd say about it, and we saw this with LeBron too, as he got re-engaged after the Luka trade. These older vets that are in their late 30s, the grind of the regular season is hard. They better believe that what they're doing matters in the big picture, or they're going to lose steam. And I think both LeBron and Steph lost steam early in the season with their limited rosters.
I'm calling this chasing the rabbit. There's no rabbit to chase. And I think that's a good observation. It's a veteran thing. A young player doesn't need the rabbit. The rabbit is getting paid for the first time or just getting more status. Draymond needs a rabbit. There needs to be a rabbit to chase. And all of a sudden, when there's a rabbit, you go, oh, whoa, they're not washed up. Oh, no, they have more, but they need a reason to do it. Now, maybe I can coin this, and you can tell me if this already exists as a term, and I've just been so out of the loop that I'm repeating something somebody has said. The Jimmy Butler acquisition and also the Luka trade has made me think about fit is a funny thing in the NBA because rest is so emphasized. And I think there's fit with and fit without. And what Jimmy Butler has accomplished for the Warriors and why it's just been such a home run short term before he does his whole thing he does at the end, and it always ends bad like a Taylor Swift song. But for now, what's been accomplished, the fit with Steph is great. You need pressure on the rim, and Steph then can operate around that. But the fit without is great as well, because Jimmy Butler can be the hub of an offense when Steph sits. It's so hard to get good fit with and good fit without. I think Luka and LeBron are just an amazing fit without. When one guy sits down, the other guy can just run the offense. The fit with has been impressive. I don't know if it's an optimal fit with. We will see that hopefully in the postseason, but the fit without is great. And so that's something that I want to popularize. And maybe you can tell me it's already been popularized, but the fit with and the fit without is something I've been thinking about in the aftermath of these trades.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I through a different terminology, I've looked at it as like, it's kind of like trading for a little bit of KD and a little bit of Andre Iguodala. Because like one of the things with Jimmy Butler is he's a little Tatum-esque in the sense that he's not really awesome at anything, but he's really good at everything. You know what I mean? Like he's a good point of attack defender, a good off-ball defender, a good rebounder, a good post player, a good screen and roll threat off and on the ball. Like he's just pretty good at everything. And so he's been able to fill all of these different roles. It's like, okay, we're facing a zone defense. Well, Jimmy's the perfect guy to put in the middle of the floor. Okay, we're going against a team where there are smalls that we can look to capitalize in space. Okay, well, Jimmy's got Jalen Brunson on the left wing and he can just take him to work. Okay, we used to run a ton of inverted ball screens with Andrew Wiggins with Steph screening for him. Now we can do that with Jimmy. He's much, much higher level playmaker. I read a stat on the show a while back, but like Jimmy's had like several orders of magnitude higher assist output in his career. He's just a much better playmaker than Andrew Wiggins ever was. There's just all these like little areas you can plug him into. And by the way, that's the case for how LeBron has been so successful this season with the Lakers, is he's been their Swiss Army knife, and they've plugged him into all these different spots depending on what the team needs. I'm a little more bullish on the Luka LeBron feed because there's this new role that's really crystallized over the last 5 to 10 years in the NBA. I'm calling it the weak side scoring forward. And it's basically like most teams right now are tagging the roller or are filling the paint with that weak side defender out of the weak side corner. And so the skip pass is becoming the pass that's open most often for the primary ball handler. And these guys are basically professional closeout attackers. So they take catch and shoot jump shots, or they drive as the defender is chasing them off the line. Rui Hachimura used to be in this role for the Lakers, but now LeBron's getting a lot of those touches off of Luka. And the Denver game in particular was a great example where you got to see LeBron attacking a lot off of that skip pass. Like where it's actually been more clunky has been when Luka's off the ball, because he just hasn't been shooting the ball very well. He's a very poor spot-up shooter in general. But I think JJ is really going to lean over the course of the rest of the season into just basically force-feeding Luka when he's on the floor and leaning more into LeBron and Austin when they're off the floor. But yeah, like that really is the ultimate fit there, is when you can count on both guys to be successful in both roles. And that's the thing. Jimmy has provided a certain floor when Steph is off the floor that was not there in the past. That was part of the reason why teams got so pessimistic, or everyone got so pessimistic on the Warriors. They looked awful at stretches this year, like straight up awful. But it's because you had these super limited lineups out there. I watched a game against the Lakers where Pat Spencer and Brandon Pajemski were the two shot creators for a lineup against the Lakers bench group. And like, that's the thing. There's, you know how Bill Simmons in his basketball, did you ever read the Bill Simmons basketball book?
I did.
Yeah. He used to talk about the secret, right? And it's like, that's really the thing. Like sometimes one small tweak can cause a bunch of parts to fall into place, and suddenly a team can greatly outperform what they used to look like. Cleveland's a great example of it too. It's like Darius Garland got healthy and better, and Evan Mobley got a little bit better in a couple of key areas. And then Kenny Atkinson came in and emphasized 2 or 3 different schematic things that were different than what they did in the past. They embraced them, and they went from a mediocre Eastern Conference playoff team to a 69 win pace. Like, and you couldn't quantify that by saying, you know, this roster addition or this specific tweak. No, it's like a couple of small things that kind of fell into place in very specific areas, and a team explodes. And that's part of that art of basketball that's very difficult to like quantify with catch-all metrics and different scientific approaches to it.
I completely agree. It's that, and it's true in media, it's true in business. The margin between success and failure is just razor thin. It's razor thin. The difference between terrible, dysfunctional, and oh my God, invincible is just so much smaller in so many walks of life than you could ever know. And so you can come to me and you say, like, here are the win shares for Jimmy Butler since the Warriors got him. He has added this many wins, and it will probably be fewer wins than you would think, and it would probably be incorrect. It would be incorrect. It can't possibly quantify these moments where the Warriors would just get their back broken because there's a run when Steph sits down, or even when he's in there and he just doesn't have it. And they let go of the rope, as Mark Jackson would say. I don't know how many times that would have happened over these past 13, 14 games, whatever, but I can almost guarantee you that it would have happened more times than whatever the win share would be for Jimmy Butler. It's just incalculable. And similarly with football, they often tell you that this guy is worth this many points, or nobody is worth all that much other than the quarterback. Maybe, but I think it's very contextual. I think it's very situational. There are Jenga pieces where if you take out that Jenga piece, the whole building falls down. And maybe one day we'll be able to quantify that properly, but we are just not there yet.
Oh, yeah. Like a perfect example for me is Jackson Hayes with the Lakers. Before the Anthony Davis trade, he was an extremely limited backup center, and the Lakers were so bad at creating space for their vertical spacers in that construct that Jackson was a guy who would occasionally get a big dunk on a roll, but he was super limited defensively, and it didn't really make a ton of sense. He is vitally important in this construct of the Lakers, because when Anthony Davis was on the team, every defensive game plan was built around overplaying the role, because AD is one of the best role men in the NBA, and he was their best player. Now, everything is geared towards the ball handler, and there's always Dorian Finney-Smith, LeBron, or Rui, or somebody who can really play on the skip. So now the defenses really have to make a decision based on whether or not to take away that lob threat, or to let that guy go and take away the skip pass. And so as a result, when Jackson's out, it's like all of a sudden guys like Trey Jemison and Jared Vanderbilt, who can't jump and they can't finish around the rim with any sort of vertical spacing threat. Like it's like, oh my goodness, we need Jackson. It's crazy how that can make such a big difference because of just a tweak in the roster. Like every player's value is specifically unique in that system. Another really quick example is Jamal Murray. I don't think Jamal Murray looks nearly as valuable in any other system because he's really only great at one thing, and it's shot making. But like next to Jokic, his shot making is the ultimate ceiling raiser. And so Jamal Murray's value in the Denver Nuggets system is every bit as important as some of the best guards in the league, even though that's not what we would consider Jamal to be. And it's all part of that artistic side of the game.
Well, it's that with Jamal, and it's also he's just been playing with Jokic for so many years that they've got a telepathy. So you could theoretically replace Murray with somebody who's better than Murray and get worse results just because you don't have that component that's been built up for a decade or whatever it's been. And it's just very contextual in that way. And that's something I like about what you do. You've got a very blood and bones perspective on basketball. And when you talk about the postseason, the physical nature of it, how that's so much different. And it's this human aspect of the game that I don't know if we got away from it. I'm not sure. Maybe you've got a perspective on whether we got away from it, because the math matters. Understanding that 3 is more than 2 matters. Understanding that you shouldn't just go with counting stats, and there's pace of play. You know, all of these things matter. And there were guys who were overrated because whatever, their games were more aesthetically pleasing, and we didn't maybe properly appreciate Chauncey Billups in his prime. But I don't know. Do you think we got away from the blood and bones aspect of basketball and we're bringing it back? Or do you think that these things have been in synthesis for a while?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there is real value in focusing on certain regular season trends through the advanced metric lens. I think like the way here's a simple stat to kind of frame this conversation. So what happens every year? We have a new team that starts kicking everybody's butt, right? Like think about like the Memphis Grizzlies a couple years ago when they first kind of came onto the scene. This year it's Cleveland in particular is the big kind of shocking one. And it happens every single year. There's another team that'll like tomorrow, next year it'll probably be Houston, and Houston will be